You're listening to the Core Factors audio library, spoken versions of Core Factors articles and research designed to support accessibility and for listening while commuting, working, or reflecting. This piece is titled Understanding Type Dynamics, a Framework for Coaching and Development. The following narration reflects the original content and intent of the written article.
Understanding Type Dynamics, a framework for coaching and development. Many practitioners reach a point where the four-letter type code no longer feels sufficient to help their clients understand their type holistically. Clients describe patterns that seem more complex than their four-letter type code might suggest, and behaviors that do not align neatly with preference descriptions. Additionally, clients tend to interpret the individual preference letters as one-dimensional rather than how those preferences operate together or as a whole. When practitioners dive deeper into the Jungian model of psychological type, they can make a real impact on how clients relate to their type. Jung's theory identifies 8 cognitive processes that describe how people take in information and make decisions. These processes form the dynamic system beneath the four-letter code. When practitioners understand them, they can interpret behavior with greater accuracy, separate natural patterns from learned adaptations, and engage in development conversations grounded in how a person's mind actually works, rather than how a type description says it should. The 8 cognitive processes. Jung identified 4 functions: sensing, intuiting, thinking, and feeling. Each operates in 2 attitudes, extroverted and introverted. This produces 8 cognitive processes, also known as function attitudes, cognitive functions, or mental processes. Everyone uses all 8, but accesses them with different degrees of ease and engages them with differing levels of confidence. Some processes feel natural and energizing to some, yet difficult and unnatural to others. Each type has processes they use only in certain situations, and others they use regularly and with self-assurance. All types have processes that can become problematic under stress and pressure. Let's begin with the perception processes. These describe how we perceive and take in the world. Extroverted sensing, or SE, engaging with what's real now. This process is rooted in the present moment, focusing on immediate sensory details and physical surroundings. Individuals who prefer this process tend to react swiftly to changes and are highly attuned to what is happening around them in real time. Introverted sensing, or SI, drawing on what's proven. This process draws on personal history and stored experiences to guide decisions. Those who prefer this process often rely on tried-and-true methods, applying knowledge from the past to current situations for practical and consistent outcomes. Extroverted intuiting, or NE, exploring possibilities and connections. This process looks outward for emerging patterns and new possibilities. Those who prefer this process tend to explore multiple ideas at once, make unexpected connections between concepts, and see potential beyond the present moment. Introverted intuiting, or NI, synthesizing meaning and future vision. This process looks inward to recognize deeper patterns and long-term implications. Those who prefer this process tend to rely on internal insights, perceive the underlying meaning in things, and develop a focused vision for the future. Now the judgment processes. These describe how we evaluate and make decisions. Extroverted thinking, or T, organizing for results. This process applies logic to external systems, focusing on efficiency and organization. Those who prefer this process tend to structure their decisions using clear steps, measurable criteria, and practical solutions to achieve objective results. Introverted thinking, or TI, refining ideas for precision. This process focuses on internal analysis and logical consistency. Those who prefer this process tend to refine ideas for accuracy, break down concepts to uncover underlying principles, and ensure their reasoning aligns with an internally structured framework. Extroverted feeling, or FE, building relationships and group harmony. This process evaluates decisions based on external values and social expectations. Those who prefer this process consider how their choices affect others, aligning with shared norms and prioritizing group cohesion in relationships and environments. Introverted feeling, or FI, staying true to personal values. This process evaluates decisions based on deeply held internal values and personal integrity. Those who prefer this process prioritize what feels authentic to them, aligning choices with these values rather than external expectations. What changes when a practitioner works at the process level? Consider two clients who both validated their type code as ENTJ. In the type descriptions, ENTJ is characterized as decisive, strategic, and organized. Both recognize themselves in the description. But in coaching, they present very different challenges. The first ENTJ is a senior vice president whose team describes her as relentless. She drives projects forward with precision, holds people accountable, and rarely slows down. Her 360 feedback says she needs to show more patience and listen more. The conventional coaching engagement may begin by addressing those behaviors directly, including development suggestions such as practicing active listening, pausing before responding, and asking more questions. The second ENTJ is a department head whose team describes him as visionary but hard to follow. He sees where the organization needs to go and restructures constantly to get there, but his team cannot keep up with the pace of change. His 360 feedback says he needs to bring people along and communicate the why. Both are ENTJs. Both have the same theoretical cognitive process pattern. Extroverted thinking dominant, introverted intuiting auxiliary, extroverted sensing tertiary, introverted feeling inferior. But the coaching conversation for each one is different because the cognitive process pattern reveals different dynamics at work. In the first example, our ENTJ seems to be primarily operating through her dominant process, extroverted thinking. She is organizing, structuring, and driving toward practical outcomes at full capacity. Through her auxiliary introverted intuiting operating in the background, she is considering the long-range strategic options. The behavior her raters are flagging, the relentlessness, is not a flaw, but her dominant and auxiliary working in concert. The development edge is in her inferior process, introverted feeling. The values dimension, the part of her pattern that would connect her decisions to what matters to the people affected by them, is less accessible. A coach who understands these dynamics can offer this client a different kind of insight than listen more. The coach can help the client see how her dominant and auxiliary are working together to drive results, and how her inferior process, introverted feeling, shapes how much of her internal values are visible to the people around her. That awareness gives the client something to explore, not a behavior to fix, but a dimension of her pattern to understand and develop over time. For the second ENTJ, the challenge is different. His dominant and auxiliary are also working together, but the raters are flagging a perception gap rather than a values gap. Through his auxiliary, introverted intuiting, he sees where things need to go. Through his dominant, extroverted thinking, he reorganizes to get there. But through his tertiary, extroverted sensing, his attunement to what his team is experiencing in the moment is operating but less automatically. He is perceiving 2 or 3 steps ahead of their reality. A coach who understands these dynamics can reframe the challenge. Rather than targeting communicate the why as a behavioral goal, the coach can help the client see that he is perceiving ahead of where his team currently is, and that through his tertiary process, his connection to what is happening in the present moment is developing but less automatic. That awareness points to a development edge, building a more deliberate practice of checking where the team actually is before restructuring where they need to go. Both clients share the same type code but are operating from different processes within their code. Differing type dynamics within the code and even different stages of development lead to very different coaching conversations. The cognitive process pattern is what makes the difference visible. Measured accessibility versus inferred order. Traditional type models infer the cognitive process order from the 4-letter code. Each type code provides a theoretical arrangement of the cognitive processes within the code. That inference is useful, and it holds as a general pattern. But life experience, professional demands, adaptation, and development influence which processes are most accessible at any given point. The Core Factors Type Dynamics Assessment addresses this through 8 process scores, which reflect how respondents scored when answering the items associated with each of the 8 cognitive processes. These scores do not infer the process order from the 4-letter code. Instead, they provide an independent indication of how each process showed up in the respondent's answers, which may or may not align with the theoretical hierarchy. For practitioners, this is valuable because it opens a conversation about where the client's lived experience may differ from what the code alone would predict. When a client's scores diverge from the expected pattern, That divergence tells a story about how their life experience has shaped their access to different processes. This could be a developmental variation or some other life scenario impacting their response, and it gives the practitioner specific information about where the conversation should focus. Why this depth matters for professional practice. The cognitive processes give practitioners and their clients a shared language, a way to think about thinking, to name what is happening in perception and judgment, and to see what is happening in the people around them. That language is portable. It applies to the next meeting, the next decision, and the next conflict, because it describes how the cognitive process pattern operates, rather than what it looks like on the surface. When practitioners work at the process level by teaching their clients about the cognitive processes, they move beyond descriptions that confirm what the client already knows, and into a framework that explains patterns the client has not been able to name. That is the shift from recognition to understanding, and it is where development begins. Type dynamics is the only instrument designed to introduce psychological type through the cognitive processes. The 13-page participant report teaches the framework before delivering results. Apply for a free pro account to see how it works, or request a demo to walk through the practitioner experience.
This concludes the audio version of this Core Factors article. You can explore the full written version and additional resources at corefactors.com.